left click on Index Line Select key, then left click on Load Panel Line Select key, and finally select Cold and Dark panel. Now we have set up the cold and dark panel state. Battery on. DC voltage check for minimum of 23 volts. Standby inverter and standby generator armed. Left inner fuel pump on. APU start. APU fuel valve extinguished. Smooth increase in EGT. APU fuel low pressure extinguished. APU power now is available. AC meter selected to APU generator. Voltage and frequency indicators in the green band. APU generator on. And finally we can set now the air conditioning. APU air switch to on. Both packs switch to on. IRS selectors to nav. Wait for nav off lights to extinguish. Select index prompt to open the index CDU page. Now select the idle page, then check the aircraft type and engine ratings. Check if the air rack cycle is updated. Go back to index page, then select pause to open position page. Check both position coordinates and current airport position are correct. Now by selecting RTE, we open the route page where I'm gonna build up my flight plan as it's shown in the paper sheet. CYYZ is my origin airport. Let's put this in the origin line box. And CYUL is my destination airport. Select departure arrival page. Select departure. My flight plan shows 06 left is my runway departure, followed by Bomet 7, which is my standard instrument departure, or SEAD for short. Then MIVOC is my transition. From the runways list, select 06 left. Then from SEAD's list, select Bomet 7. Then from the applicable transition list, I will select MIVOC. Select route page. As you can see, the first page is full and complete. Let's have a quick look at our departure sequence. Runway 06 left, Bomet 7 transition MIVOC. That's correct, I'm satisfied with this, so let's step to the next page to complete our flight plan. After MIVOC, direct to Avon. Direct to Avon. Avon is followed by Alouette 1, which is a standard arrival procedure for CYUL. Then ILS 06 right approach. So let's go back to departure arrival page. Select arrival. From the stars list, select Alouette 1. For the approach, I select ILS 06 right. I forgot to select Avon transition. Now I'll walk through the route page to check for any discontinuity between waypoints. My route looks good. Select activate, then execute. Now, in order to ensure that our flight plan is set correctly, we need to do a quick revision by selecting legs page. Now for the navigation display, we select plan format. Then you can select your desired range. Now I will use the step line select key to center in sequence my flight plan waypoints on my navigation display, starting from the departure airport all the way to destination. The purpose of this revision is to ensure that the flight plan in navigation display looks the same as the flight plan filed in the paper sheet. Now select perf init page. My fuel reserve is 1.2 and my cruising altitude is 18,000 feet. Execute. To complete this task, I need to use the thrust rating panel, or TRP for short, and the speed card and the outside air temperature gauge. First, I read the outside air temperature from the OAT gauge. As you can see, the indicator shows 12 degrees centigrade. Using the outer rotary selector, I select temperature. Then I adjust my temperature, which is 12 degrees centigrade, using the inner knob and the small window. After we set this temperature, we enable FSX to compute and set the takeoff thrust automatically. Then I select the V1 with the outer selector knob. Now, if you have no specific V1 speed, you can simply enter the same value as the VR in V1 window. Since I'm using 18 degrees flaps for my takeoff, using the speed card with 18 degrees flaps setting, VR is 134. As I said, if I consider V1 equal to VR, I put 134 in the window using the inner knob. Now I select VR using the outer rotary selector. Basically, you position the knob to V cross position. V cross represents VR. Then you cross check this value shown in the window with the VR value shown in the speed card. And finally, we select V dot again with the outer rotary selector. V dot is represented by VFTO in the speed card. Now let's have a quick look to our V-speeds and N1 parameters to confirm that all is set correctly. With the outer rotary selector, I'll start from the left all the way to the last selection, which is V dot. Now I start with selecting N1, 96.6, takeoff N1 limit. Above the engine indications shows 96.6 confirmed. V1 134, VR or V cross 134, V dot 184, and finally we pick up our V2 from the speed cards, which is 138, and put this in the IS Mach window. By giving this speed to the flight computer guidance, the autopilot will give us the correct pitch guidance during the takeoff phase. And this completes the thrust rating panel setup. Turn the avionics switches all to on. For the flight computer guidance selector, you can select number 2 if you are flying as a first officer. Since I'm flying as a captain, I will select number 1. Anti-skid and lift spoilers switch to on. And brake fans switch set to auto. We check both hydraulic quantities and we make sure they're not below the service level. Now we check the AC pump to ensure that both the auto and on selections are working properly. First, we select the auto. As the pressure starts rising, we turn the switch to on and watch for the indicator continuing rising to nominal pressure. And also we check the power transfer unit by switching the PTU switch to on. The pressure indicator should rise to 2600 psi, and this complete the AC pump and PTU check. Finally, we turn off both PTU and AC pump to off. Feeder tanks fuel quantity check. Cross feed shut. Center tank transfer auto. Right and left standby pumps normal. Common feed valves set to shut. All the fuel pumps off except the left inner pump, which is feeding the APU right now. All switch in engines panel set to off. Set landing altitude for pressurization. To defog the windshield windows, turn on both the screen heat switch to on. All the ice protection switches set to off. Set the lights as desired. No smoking set to on. Nav on. Flight deck and cabin temperature controllers set to auto. And turn on the flight deck and cabin fans if desired. Ram air shut. Packs on. Cabin air set as desired. APU air on. Engine air switches off. After a completion of the overhead panel, we move down to set up the mode control panel starting from the left. Flight director select to on. MA or master light comes on. Auto throttle switch to arm. Green light comes on. V2 138 is set in the IS Mac window. Now we need to set our initial departure heading using the first page of my route on the CDU. My departure heading is 057. Heading set to 057. Now we set our cruise altitude to 18,000 feet. And this complete the MCP panel. Moving down to the main panel and starting from the clock and check if the time is correct. Moving to PFD, we check the correct setup starting from V1 134, V2 138, auto throttle takeoff max armed, and finally FD on takeoff mode. We set our altimeter. Now we need to set our navigation display properly using the FS panel. Select the navigation mode to LNAV. Format selector to map. Adjust the range as desired. Finally, select your preferred data to be displayed. I prefer ETA or estimated time of arrival. Now the navigation display is set to LNAV1 source mode. Our initial distance and heading are shown on the left upper corner of the ND. 0.5 nautical mile with 057 degrees track. Our selected heading 057 and ETA selected data are also shown on our navigation display. Now with the annunciator test button, we push in to check if there is no missing light. We check our oil quantity to be above the minimum servicing level. Then moving down to N1 takeoff limit to check if it is correct. We check our loaded total fuel and compare this with our trip planned fuel. Now I need to select my takeoff thrust limit, and we have only two options: maximum takeoff or reduced takeoff. In this flight I'll select maximum for my takeoff thrust. Then moving down to the pressurization window, and we check if our landing altitude is set correctly. At this point I'm done with the main panel. Let's now step to the FMC. Flight plan is complete. Performance initialization page is complete, and we can have a look at our VNAV pages, starting with climb page. Cruising altitude 18,000 feet. Climb speed 240.62 Mach. Now for the cruise page, our target speed is 260 knots. 2.70 Mach. And finally, descent page. End of descent is 118 feet. Descent target speed is 220.60 Mach. FS control panel set. Spoilers lever in, flaps up, thrust levers fuel off. Rudder trim position centered. Elevator trim set to the green band. Aileron trim position centered. Park brake set to park. Set the desired radio frequencies. Transponder set to standby. And we can test our brake temperature lights. And they're all working properly. Set the ADF frequency as desired. And this complete the pre-flight flow. Brakes set to park. The lights and notices set as desired, except the no smoking switch and nav switch should be in on position. Thrust levers fuel off. Altimeter set. For the AC power, I'm gonna use APU generator. Using the master warning system panel, we check if all the doors are closed, and as you can see, cabin door not shut and lower door not shut, and we have to close them right now. And to do so, we click on the pedal adjust handle to open the QUALITYWINGS control panel and click on the red icons to close the doors. Now the doors warning amber lights are out. Left and right windows are closed. Takeoff thrust set to max and 96.6 N1. V1 134, V cross 134, V dot 184, V2 138 and set in IS window. Trims all set, and this complete the before engine start check. Beacon on, packs off, APU air off, engine anti-ice on, brake fans off, fuel pumps on, start master select on, start power on confirmed. The start sequence will be 1, 4, 3, 2. Now let's select the engine 1. Engine start. Ignition and starter annunciators come on. At about 10% N2, right click the fuel cutoff switch on the thrust lever of the selected engine. This will move the thrust lever into the idle detent and enable the fuel flow to the engine. At about 20% N2, the ignition will activate, then the EGT start rising. We monitor our EGT for a hot start. It should not reach the red mark. Oil pressure is rising. At 40% N2, starter operating annunciator extinguished. Engine parameters stabilized at idle. AC meter select to engine 1. Generator AC voltage and frequency in the green band. Generator 1 select to on. Start select to engine 4. We repeat the same procedures with the other engines. All engines stabilized at idle, and this complete the engine start procedure. As soon as we got the 4 engines started and stabilized at idle, we go to our start panel and position the start selector to off and turn the master switch to off. Turn off the engine and the ICE switches. Brake fans set to auto. Now we turn the hydraulic engine 2 and 3 pumps to on. Then we check the hydraulic pressure for 31,000 psi in both systems. Now we set the AC pump to auto and the PTU switch to on. Heaters switch set to on. Now we check our speeds. V1 134, V2 138, takeoff thrust 96.6% N1 and V dot 184. For the bleed air, I'm using APU air with no engine air, so all engine air set to off. APU air set to on. Packs set to on, and this complete the after engine start check. This is the view from the top of my departure airport, showing my current aircraft position. Using my departure airport diagram, first I'll spot my current position, which is approximately here. Since 06 left is my takeoff runway, the taxi sequence will be as follow. Starting from my current position, taxiing to my left toward taxiway Victor, then left on Foxtrot, then right on Delta, which takes me to the runway 06 left. Let's go back to the view from the top of my departure airport, and based on airport diagram, this is Vector taxiway, this is Foxtrot, and finally Delta taxiway is this one. Now we have a good idea on how to proceed to the runway. Let's get started with the before taxi items. Starting with the brakes check, apply full brake using your pedals. This should cause an increase in the hydraulic pressure of the accumulator in the yellow system to a minimum of 2200 psi, as it's shown on the yellow system gauge, and this complete the brakes check. Takeoff flap select 18 degrees. Flaps position indicator in transit and set to 18 degrees, confirmed. Taxi light on. Apply brakes to disengage the park brake. Slowly advance thrust levers and allow the aircraft to start moving. Now, as you can see, the taxiway Victor is straight ahead. The next taxiway will be Foxtrot, which is coming up, and I'm gonna turn to the left. And for the taxi safety, I have always to check the left and right for traffic before entering in the taxiway. Now I'm looking for the next taxiway, which is Delta, and I have to make a right turn. Right clear, left clear, Now this taxiway will take me to the holding short of the runway 06 left. Now as I'm taxiing to the runway, I have to complete the before takeoff check. In this procedure, we only check the critical items related to the takeoff safety, starting with the flaps, and they're set to 18 degrees. Trims all set. Flight instruments checked. Master warning system annunciator lights should look dark. Checked. Continuous ignitions, I leave them off since there is no icing conditions. Auto throttle armed, and this complete the before takeoff check. Now I have to stop and hold short of the runway. When we receive the takeoff clearance from the tower, we do the runway entry or takeoff items, starting with the landing light. Select on, strobe set to on, transponder select TARA, traffic on final, clear. Advance thrust levers to allow aircraft to move to the lineup position. Advance thrust levers to allow engine power to increase and stabilize to between 50 and 60% N1. Click on Toga spot to initiate the takeoff thrust. Auto throttle takeoff max green. Now we're gonna hear the computer voices call out. The first one will be 80 knots when we reach the 80 knots speed. The second call out will be V1, where we move our hand away from the thrust levers. The third call out will be rotate.
$89. V1. Rotate.
Positive climb rate, gear up.
V2.
Now I need to select an intercept heading to enable LNAV guidance. Now as you can see, our pre-selected heading crosses our first leg we want to intercept. At 400 radio altitude we can select LNAV. LNAV 1 green, confirmed. Now I'm flying using Flight Director. At 1000 radio altitude we select VNAV and we set our climb power. In this case I select normal climb power. Auto throttle climb normal, green, confirmed. Now the aircraft is speeding up toward V dot, where we can safely retract the flaps. Flaps up. At this point I can engage the autopilot by selecting nav 1. Autopilot engaged, confirmed. Now I turn the engine's air switches to on. Then I turn off the APU air. APU stop. At 10,000 feet we turn off the landing lights. Power transfer unit switch select off. And this completes the takeoff and climb procedure. We've just passed 13,000 feet and we're still in climb toward our cruise altitude, which is 18,000 feet. My cruise altitude is set on the MCP. Let me open the progress page on my CDU. Our estimated time to reach the top of climb is 1733 Zulu with 10 nautical mile distance. The estimated fuel over the top of the climb will be 3,300 kilograms. As you can see on navigation display, the top of climb is shown with the small green circle. This is the estimated position where we intercept our cruise altitude. Now we're about to reach our cruising altitude and the pitch mode shows altitude acquire. Now you can see the alt annunciation came up, which means that the pitch mode is now holding our cruise altitude. The auto throttle is holding the cruise planned speed, which is 260, which is pre-selected on our FMS. If we go back to our CDU and select VNAV, you can see first our active flight phase is in cruise. Our target speed is 260. And we can see also our cruise distance from now to the top of descent is 177 nautical mile, and the estimated time to reach the top of descent will be at 1806 Zulu. Now let's go back to the progress page. Currently we are flying to Talib waypoint and it's shown in magenta. Distance to go is 11 nautical mile. ETA is 1736 Zulu. Estimated fuel will be left in our tanks is 3000 kilograms. And distance to go to our destination, which is CYUL, is 231 nautical miles. Estimated time of arrival is 1826 Zulu, and we arrive our destination with 1700 kilograms fuel, 5.6 nautical mile, and about 1 minute to reach Talib. And now we are flying over Talib and the time is 1737. Let's now calculate fuel over Talib. 1556 plus 1466 kilograms gives us a total of 3024 kilograms, which is close to our 3000 kilogram predicted fuel at Talib. Now our next waypoint is Bomit. 18 nautical miles to go. Our estimated time of arrival is 1740 Zulu with the predicted leftover fuel of 2900 kilograms. And we keep doing the same routine with the fuel and time checks over the remaining waypoints. We're about 108 nautical miles from the top of descent. Let's do the approach briefing. Currently I'm flying to A1, which is the entry waypoint for my star. The star I'm gonna fly is Alouette 1 with A1 transition. Then for the approach I'm gonna fly is the ILS runway 06 right. Let me first check this with the arrival page in my CDU. As you can see, Alouette 1 star is active. ILS 06 right is active. Checked. This is my star chart, Alouette 1, transition A1. I'm looking for the altitude and speed constraints, if any. As you can see, at HAPS waypoint for the runway 06 right, I have to be at or below 9,000 feet. In my CDU legs page shows 9,000 feet or below at HAPS, checked. And this is my ILS runway 06 right approach chart. In the profile section, as we can see, 3,000 feet is the altitude at which I have to be at 44 waypoint. And my CDU legs page again shows 3000 feet pre-selected altitude at 44 waypoint. Checked. Let's go back to my approach chart. The localizer frequency is 110.5. Let's set this on my nav1 radio, 110.50. .50 on the standby window. Then select this to the active window. The final approach course is 057 degrees. 057 degrees. Set. Now I'm looking for my decision height. Since this aircraft is a category C, my decision height is 200 feet radio altitude. Using my altitude minimums knob, I set 200 radio altitude. Checked. My destination airport elevation, as you can see on my approach chart, is 118 feet. And I have to set this in my pressurization panel using the landing altitude knob. 100 feet is the closest number to 118. Set. And you can check this in the pressurization window. As you can see, landing altitude is 100 feet. Checked. Now let's prepare our approach speeds. The expected temperature at the destination airport is 16 degrees Celsius. First, using the outer rotary selector, I select temperature selection, then I set 16 degrees Celsius using the inner knob. Moving to my speed card, and since I'm using 33 degrees flaps for the landing, my VRF is 123. I'm gonna put this in V1 first. I'll select V1 using the outer selector, then I'll set 123 using the small knob. Then I'll put VREF plus 20, which is in my case 143, in V cross selection. Select V cross, then set 143 in the small window. Finally, using my speed card, again my VFTO is 181. Let me set this in V dot selection. I'll select first V dot with the outer selector, then using small knob I'll set 181 in the window, and this complete the approach speeds setup. Now I'm about 29 nautical miles to the top of descent. Let's select descent page from VNav. Our descent speed is 220. To make our descent intercept smoother, I prefer to decelerate and stabilize my speed at 220, which is my descent speed, before reaching the top of descent. To do so, first I have to select thrust to on, then using the speed knob I set 220 in the speed window. .220 set, checked, and the auto throttle is decelerating the aircraft to the 220 knots. As you can see, the selected speed bar is coming up. And now I need to set my minimum descent altitude in the MCP. This is the altitude at which I intercept the glide slope. .3,000 feet, checked. Our top of descent is coming up, and when we intercept the top of descent, the vertical deviation scale will show up. Now the vertical deviation scale came up, as you can see. At this very moment, I have to select VNav and let the aircraft fly the FMS vertical profile. As you can see, the white diamond symbol or the vertical deviation indicator is in the center of the full deviation scale, which means that we are flying the exact descent profile. Moving up to the PFD, and we are established at our planned descent speed, shown with the blue speed bug. We just passed 10,000 feet. Now I have to turn on the landing lights. PTO select to on, and for the air settings, in case of an overshooting, I need a maximum go round power available. So in this case I have to use APU air instead of the engine air. So I can configure this right now, starting with the APU start switch to start. I'll wait for the APU power available green lights to come on. Now the APU power is available. Now I can select APU air to on, then engine air switches select to off. Air configuration is done. Now we are at 50 nautical miles to final fix, which is FOLFO. Now I will start reducing my speed and configure my aircraft for the landing. Select thrust to on, and using the speed knob I set my speed to 160. Now I'll go to my FS panel and select navigation display source to VL mode. Localizer 1 in ND confirmed. Localizer arm. Localizer 1 white confirmed. Localizer deviation indicator is alive and glide slope indicator is alive. Now I select approach mode. Lock green, GS1 white checked. Speed at the V dot, flaps 18, glide slope at half that, gear down, and 3 green. I select now my flaps to 24 and set the speed to 143. The blue bug overlapping the V-cross checked. GS green checked. And now I set my heading to the runway heading, which is 57. My missed approach altitude is 3000 and it's set checked. Toga set to max checked. Now I select my flaps to 33 degrees and the speed set to VREF plus 5, which is in my case 128. And now I'm flying at the approach speed shown by the blue buck, and the one symbol in magenta represents my VREF. Now I disconnect the autopilot and I will fly the approach manually using the flight director.
Approaching decision height.
Auto throttle disconnect.
Minimums.
Continue.
$100, 60, 50, 40,
Slowly I retard
30,
my power to the idle.
20, 10,
Spoilers full out, checked. Apply brakes to slow down the aircraft. After clearing the runway, we turn the switch from the landing to taxi lights. Strobe lights switch to off. Transponder selector to standby. Flaps select to up. Now I'm turning to my parking spot. After I have stopped my aircraft, I apply the back brake. AC meter selector to APU generator position, and we check our voltage and frequency are in the green bands. APU generator selector to on. Engines shut down using your right click on the mouse. Fasten belt switch sign to off. Beacon light off. Fuel pump set to off except the left inner pump, which is feeding the APU. Hydraulic engine 2 and 3 pumps switch to off. PTU off and AC pump set to off. And we turn off both the generator 1 and 4. Screen heat and air data heaters switch set to off. We turn off the IRS selectors. Yaw dampers master switch off. Avionic and autopilot master switch set to off. Brake fan switch set to off. And skid and lift spoiler switch set to off. Galley switch set to shed. We turn off the packs. Then the APU switch set to off. Now we can stop the APU. APU generator off. Left inner fuel pump set to off. Standby inverter and standby generator switch set to off. Battery switch set to off. Click on the pedal adjuster handle to open the QUALITYWINGS control panel. Click on the wheel chock to chock the aircraft. Click on the engine covers icon to cover the engines, and this completes the tutorial on the after landing and securing the QUALITYWINGS RG series.